This video is to help you review for the Unit 7 quiz. It will give you example problems as to what the types of problems you might see on the quiz. And as you know, those also would be problems that could be very well on the Unit 7 test. So the first one says Bill is purchasing accordion lessons. There's a $30 materials fee for the class, and each lesson costs $20. And they're giving you an equation which represents C, the total cost of the lessons, where X is the number of lessons he takes. So they're telling us that the equation for this scenario is this: the $30 materials fee, and then $20 per lesson, so 20 times X, the number of lessons he takes, equaling C, the total cost. All right. So then the second part of this basically says if his cost is $190, how many lessons did he take? So even though they gave you the setup, they also gave you the equation. And so you're simply going to, insert the fact that the total cost is $190 and solve to figure out how many lessons he took. So we're going to take this equation and we're going to replace the total cost with 190, and we're going to be solving for X, which is the number of lessons he took. So our first step, of course, would be that we want to get the variable X by itself. So we are going to want to get rid of this plus 30 that's being attached to the 20x. And the way to get rid of, so to speak, a plus 30 is to subtract 30. In other words, the inverse operation to add 30 is to subtract 30. If we do it to one side of the equation, we're also going to do it to the other side of the equation. So we're going to subtract 30 on both sides. When we do that, 190 minus 30 is going to give us 160. So that's coming straight down. The equal sign is coming straight down. The 20x is coming straight down. And then the positive 30 and minus 30, or adding 30 and subtracting 30, is zeroing out, and we wouldn't have to write that any longer. So we now have 160 equals 20x. Again, our goal is to get x by itself. X is currently being multiplied by 20, so the inverse operation is to divide by 20. We're going to do that on both sides of the equation. 160 divided by 20 will be 8, and 20x divided by 20 would just be 1x, or x. So we have 8 being x, which means that is how many lessons he took, 8 lessons. The second example has to do with simple interest. So if Jamie puts $4,000 in a savings account that earns 3% interest, after 7 years, how much money will she have? So you would first of all write down the simple interest formula, which we talked about earlier in this unit, which is that interest equals P for principal times rate times time. Keep in mind, principal is the amount of money that you are either borrowing or, in this case, putting into a savings account. R is the rate, and it will be written as a decimal. It is a percentage, but you'll convert it to a decimal in this equation. And T stands for time. So in this situation, $4,000 again will replace the P because that's the amount of money going into the account. 3% interest rate converted to a decimal is 300ths because you're moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. And the time is going to be 7 years. When you do that, you're going to find out that she's earning $840 in interest. But we need to make sure that we're answering the question that they're asking, which is how much money will she have at the end of the 7 years? Well, she's going to get the amount of interest back, but she's also going to get the money that she put into the account back. So how much money she'll have at the end of the 7 years is going to be the $4,000 that she put in plus that $840 in interest, so $4,840. So it's important to make sure that you read carefully to see what they're asking, which is not in this case how much interest she'll have after 7 years, but how much money she will get back from the bank after 7 years, which would be how much she put into the bank plus the interest that she earned, giving us the total. Then they want us to basically sort of use that same formula, but find the principal. So they're saying, what would be the principal amount? In other words, how much money did you put into the account if you earned $500 in interest at a rate of 8% over a 4-year period? So again, you're going to write down your equation. Interest equals principal times rate times time. But in this case, we're going to be solving for the principal. The interest amount that she earns is $500, so that will go here in place of I. Equal sign will be written down. P for principal amount is what we're solving for, so we'll leave that with our variable term. The interest rate, again, is 8%, but we'll convert that to a decimal, so 800ths, moving the decimal point over 2 places to the left, and the time is 4. So again, just one more time where this information is coming from, the interest amount is $500. The rate as a decimal is 8%, changed to a decimal being 800ths, and the time is 4 years, so that's where those numbers are coming from. So the amount of interest, the percentage of the interest rate changed to a decimal, and the time. And we're going to solve for the P, the principal. So when we solve this type of equation, which we've done last unit as well, we would start by multiplying these two numbers. So we'd multiply the 800ths times the 4 and get 3200ths, or 0.32, times the P. All right. So what we've done is we've multiplied the two values here, and then that is the coefficient or the multiplier in terms of the P. So we now have 500 equals 0.32 times P. Again, our goal is to get P by itself. So we are going to divide both sides by 3200ths. And when we do that, 500 divided by 3200ths would go in your calculator. 500 divided by 3200ths. And that'll give us the amount there. And on this side, we're creating a giant 1 in front of our P, so it's just going to be P. 500 divided by 3200ths, again, would go into your calculator like this. So you get 1562.5, but again, we don't write money with only one decimal place. We would need to add that 0. So $1,562.50. Again, you could check to make sure that you feel comfortable in your answer, because you could put this $1,562.50 here in place of P, times the interest rate as a decimal, times the time, and you should get $500 in interest, the amount that you've earned. So again, you could kind of work it through to make sure that you feel confident in your answer, but this would be the principal amount that you'd put into the account at a rate of 8% for 4 years to earn $500 in interest. Here again, you're just going to be solving and checking your solutions, doing some more of the spiraling through this curriculum. So we know that when we want to solve this, we would first think about getting 3m by itself on one side and the number on itself by itself on the other side. So we would need to subtract 14. So 38 minus 14 would give us 24. Again, that's just coming straight down here. Equal sign comes down, the 3m comes down, and the 14 minus 14 would zero out. So that will be gone. So we now have the equation 24 equals 3m. And of course, we would divide both sides by 3 to get m by itself. And so 8 would equal m. In terms of checking your solution, remember you're putting the solution that you got, the 8 equal to m, into that original equation. So you're putting it into this equation right here in place of the m, and showing that left side equals the right side. So you'd write down 38 equals 3 times the value of m, which we're saying is 8, plus 14. So 38 equals 3 times 8 plus 14. Again, that's just a rewrite of this equation, replacing 8 with m. And then we would get 38 equals 24 plus 14. 38 equals 38, and we show that that checks. The next one is on a road map. If 1 inch represents 26 miles, how many miles would 2.5 inches represent? So of course you can solve this in more than one way, but one way that would make a lot of sense based on what we've done is the idea of using cross products. So we know that 1 inch is equal to 26 miles. So we can set that up as a ratio. And then we would put 2.5 inches, inches across from inches, miles across from miles here. And then you can use your cross products to solve. So 2.5 times 26 divided by 1 will give us the value of x, which is 65 miles. This one we are told that a telephone's pole shadow is 50 feet long at the same time that the shadow of a 6-foot man is 5.5 feet long. We want to know how long the telephone pole is. Make sure on this type of problem that you read it closely to make sure that you're setting it up correctly with your cross products. So the telephone pole shadow is 50 feet long, and the shadow of the 6-foot man is 5.5 feet long. So the shadow is 5.5 feet long for the man. The telephone pole shadow is 50 feet long. The man's height is 6 foot. All right. That's important to be sure that we have that correct so we can set it up correctly. So we would say, all right, the 6-foot man is casting a 5.5 foot shadow, and the telephone pole shadow is 50 foot. Again, shadow across from shadow, the height of the man across from the height of the telephone pole. Do your cross product. So again, multiply diagonally the two that you know, and then you're going to divide by the third value. Okay, so 6 times 50, get that value and divide by 5.5. And you get 54.54 repeating. All right, and again, we would just put the repeating bar over the 5 and 4 because that continues to repeat in a 5-4 pattern behind the decimal point. So the pole's height is 54.54 repeating feet. This one says a fish swam for 2 hours at 6 kilometers per hour, then 4.5 hours at 3 kilometers per hour. How far did it travel? So this is not the same as a cross product situation. This is a, traveling situation where it's gone 2 hours at this rate, then 4.5 hours at this rate. So the question is, what was the total distance that it traveled? Well, we know that distance equals rate times time. So in the first part of its trip, again, it went for a rate of 6 kilometers per hour times a time of 2 hours. So that's representing this portion of the trip. And then for the second portion of the trip, it went at 3 kilometers per hour for 4.5 hours. That's this portion of its journey. So we would multiply, and then our last step would be to add. So 6 times 2 is 12. 3 times 4.5 is 13.5. Altogether, then it travels 25.5, 25.5 kilometers. You will have to do some solving for x. Again, really, this is just the same as a cross product situation. So you're going to multiply diagonally across the two values that you know, which in this case is the 9 and 7. And then you're going to divide by the third value, which is the 8. So again, 9 times 7 would be 63. And then you would divide by your third value, which is 8. So 63 divided by 8 will give you the x value of 7 and 875 thousandths. And of course, we would not round that. We would leave that exact. What value of h makes this equation true? Now, this one is a little bit different because we have 15 divided by h, not h divided by 15. So one way you could think of that is 15 divided by h could be thought of in this format. 15 divided by h has to equal 60, or 15 divided by h has to equal 60 over 1. The advantage to making it 60 over 1 is, again, we're set up now with a cross product situation. So we can take 15 times 1 and then divide by 60. Now, a lot of people might say, well, that's going to be 4, because you think, well, 15 times 4 is 60. But again, we've got to be careful about what we're asked to do here. 15 divided by 4 is not 60. So again, if you look at our cross product situation, 15 times 1 is 15, divided by 60 is not 4, it's 1/4, which is 25 hundredths. So our answer for H is 0.25, 25 hundredths, or 1/4. 15 divided by 1/4 is 60. So again, just make sure you look that over closely. What value of T makes this equation true? So 70 plus what value equals 48? And we can set it up as the equation, of course, and subtract 70 from both sides, because again, our goal is to get T by itself. And when you take that 70 minus 70, that will zero out. The T will come down, the equal sign will come down, and 48 minus 70 is a negative 22. All right, so 70 plus negative 22 would equal positive 48. You're also going to be asked for the quiz to simplify expressions. Remember, simplifying is the idea of combining like terms. So in this, in this set of terms added to this set of terms, we want to look at what can be combined. So 3x squared can be combined with 2x squared. Those are like terms. When we combine them, then we'll get 5x to the second power, 5x squared. And we have 4x, but 4x doesn't have any other terms that is alike to that. It doesn't have any other terms that it can be combined with. So it'll stay plus 4x. And then the 6 and the 9, both being constant terms, of course, can be combined. So we'll get plus 15. Same idea here. You're basically combining any like terms that you can. So 8x squared does not have any other term that is alike with it, no other x squared terms. So just be 8x squared. The 4x can be combined with the minus 7x, or you could think of it as 4x added to a negative 7x. So you get a minus 3x either way. And then the negative 5 can combine with the negative 8, or minus 5 and minus 8, either way giving you minus 13. Adding a negative being the same as subtracting. For this one, when you're simplifying these expressions, it's a little bit tougher because you have a subtraction in front here. So what you need to do is think about your distributive property before you can combine your like terms. So what I mean by that is this negative sign needs to be distributed, all these values, all these terms, before you can combine your like terms. All right. So you can think of this, if it helps you, as 6x squared plus 6x minus 1 times 4x squared minus 2x plus 1. All right. Again, you don't have to think of it that way, but if it helps you, you're taking then that negative 1 times each of these values as your first step for the distributive property. So when we do that, that's the distributive property, which is why I put the dp here. So the 6x squared just came down. The plus 6x just came down. The minus times 4x squared, or again, if you want to think of it as negative 1 times 4x squared, is going to give you a minus 4x squared. The minus times minus 2x is going to give you a plus 2x. Again, you can think of it if you want to as negative 1 times negative 2x. Either way, it's going to give you a plus 2x. And the minus times the plus 8 is going to give you a minus 8. So you don't need to look at this step if that doesn't make it any clearer to you, but the key is that this negative sign is going to be multiplied by all the values inside the parentheses. Or you can think of that as being the same as a negative 1 being multiplied by all those terms, whatever makes the most sense to you. Once you got it to this point, then again, we're just looking for like terms being combined. So we would say, all right, we have a 6x squared, we have a minus 4x squared. Those two can be combined to give us a 2x squared. And then we have a plus 6x and a plus 2x. Those can be combined to give us a plus 8x. And we have a minus 8. There's no other constant term, so that cannot be combined with anything else, so just be plus 8. So that'll be our final answer, and that is, again, the step of combining like terms. It is the same idea for this below. we have this negative, which is going to need to be multiplied by the values inside the parentheses. Again, if it makes it easier for you, you can also think of it as -1 being multiplied by those values inside the parentheses, because multiplying by -1 is the same as multiplying by a negative. So whichever makes more sense for you, that is totally up to you. But the key to it again is that with the first term, 4x is just going to come down. So that's not going to change. The 4x will come down. The plus 12 will just come down. But when we take that negative times -2x, we're going to get a plus 2x. So the negative times the negative gives us a positive 2x. And the negative times the -6 gives us a positive 6. All right, and again, you can see that either case here. -1 times -2x gives us a positive 2x. -1 times -6 gives us a positive 6. Or just negative times -2x is positive 2x. Negative times -1 is positive 6. And again, combining our like terms would be our next step. So 4x and 2x can combine, and then as well as the 12 and the 6 can combine. So we are going to get 6x plus 18 plus, and I'm sorry, and that is combining like terms. That is our final answer though. You will also have to solve this type of equation. So if we have 1/9 x equaling 1/4, what would x equal? Well, the coefficient on the x is 1/9, so we would want to divide both sides by 1/9. All right. And again, when you do that, 1/9 and 1/9 here create a giant 1, so we just get x. And then 1/4 divided by 1/9 is 2 1/4 as a mixed number, or if you went with a decimal because of your calculator, 2.25 would work as well. All right, now you can use a scientific calculator for this. That'd be an option. If you didn't have a scientific calculator, you could also do this with our keep change flip. We have 1/4 divided by 1/9. And so we would rewrite that as 1/4 times 9/1. Here's our keep. Here's our change to division and multiplication. And here's our flip, 9/1. And that would give you 9/4. Quite messy, I apologize. But 9/4 is the same as 2 1/4 or 2 25/100. This other one says a triangle has a base of b and a height of h. What equations could be used to find the area? So again, any of the equations that would work to find the area is what we'd want to mark in this case. So we know that one formula for area of a triangle is to take base times height divided by 2. But you could also think of it as 1/2 times base times height. You sometimes see it that way in books because dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2. Or, of course, 1/2 could be written as a decimal, so 0.5 times base times height. All right, so in each case, the base of the triangle, of course, is here, and we're talking about the height being the perpendicular height. So all of these types of equations could be used to find the area of a triangle. We will also have to do some solving equations that are a little bit more in depth, sort of like our last unit. So our first step in this equation would be to combine our like terms. So when we do that, 3x is going to stay 3x. A plus 4 and minus 8 is going to become a minus 4. Our equal sign will come down. On this side of the equation, we have 2x plus 2x, so that's 4x, and our minus 18 would come down. So again, we're just combining our like terms here. Then remember, our goal is to get the x terms on one side, the number terms on the other. So we could subtract 3x from both sides. When we do that, this will zero out. So we'll get a -4. Remember to bring it down as a -4 because subtracting 4 and adding a -4 are the same thing. So we need to bring that down that way. The equal sign, the 4x minus 3x gives us x, and the minus 18 comes down. Then we would add 18 to both sides, and so we get x equal to 14. If it doesn't say you have to show the check, then you do not have to show the check. Of course, the check is always a good idea just for the sake of feeling confident in your answer. So that is a summary of the quiz type questions. I realize it is somewhat lengthy, but hopefully as you look it over, you can stop the video at any place that will be helpful, and feel free to email me if you have questions. Thanks.